It is October 9th, and you know what October is, right? It's the season of the witch. So, what I decided for today, and actually for the entire month, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be covering different aspects of Wicca, paganism, witchcraft, magic, everything dealing with this particular season. This is a very special season to those of us who do practice the craft. For those of you that do not know, we do consider Halloween our new year. It is the beginning of the solar cycle, Wheel of the Year cycle. And as such, we also believe that the veil is very thin. That gives us an opportunity to connect with our ancestors and attune with those who have moved on before us, tap into their wisdom and their knowledge. Um, but before we get started, of course, I'd like to welcome my co-producer, who's joining me live from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Treva Lynn Knott. How are you today, Treva? Are you there? I heard a click. Okay, Treva, we can't hear you, so please, everyone, please be aware that Treva is going to be keeping an eye on the chat, not only in Revolution Radio, but as well the comment section of the Facebook live stream. So by all means, if you have any questions during today's show, you're welcome to put some questions down, and we will do our best to answer them for you during today's broadcast. And like I said, this month we are going to be focusing on all things Wicca, all things witchcraft, to celebrate the season. As I said, this is the season of the witch. Today we are going to be doing a loose version of Wicca 101. This is a great time for you to ask your questions if you are new to the path, or if you have any confusion or questions. This is the time of year that I like to educate and inform as much as possible. I've always been the, how shall I say, in the past I've been the information guy during this time of year with a lot of media outlets. And usually this time of year I do like to teach Wicca 101 during Earth Spirit. Unfortunately, here in Roanoke, I have not had time to do an IRL in real life class of Wicca 101, so I felt, why don't I just do it here live on Facebook for everybody, and give us the opportunity to continue with this particular tradition of doing Wicca 101 in October. Anyway, with that being said, let me say that if you have seen my Wicca 101 or participated in Wicca 101 in the past, I am doing a completely different outline this year. I wanted to mix things up a little bit. I wanted to get more to the nuts and bolts of it as well. There's only so much we can do in 1 hour. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Actually, before I do that, let me jump in by saying that normally most Wicca 101s, what you'll hear is you'll hear about history. You'll hear about how Wicca got started, Gerald Gardner, and the whole path of how modern Wicca came to evolve. You'll hear about beliefs and practices and about magic and traditions. We're going to hear a little bit about that today, but I'm going to kind of just jump right in and go do a quick overview of all of those. Again, we've got 1 hour, so by all means, if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and chime in and ask what you'd like. Let me say hello to a few people I see there. Hello, Adrian, my bud. Hi, Vince. Hi, Tone. Hi, Mark. Good to see you all here. And merry meet, everyone. So let's start off with the big question. What is Wicca? Well, Wicca is, the definition of Wicca can be loosely translated as wise one. It's an old Saxon word, I believe. Wicca being the, if I'm not mistaken, the masculine, and Wicca being the feminine, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm not going to get too much into the, what is it, the study of the actual word. Loosely translated, Wicca is the religion of witchcraft. It is an earth religion, and it is based, and again, let me precurse all of this by saying that this is all my interpretation, my experience, and what I have seen and accumulated through years and years of practice and study. For me, Wicca is a blend of ancient pagan practices mixed in with some Freemasonic practices and mixed in with some shamanic practices, and it has evolved into its own modern-day religion. It is recognized by many countries now. It's recognized by the United States military, and many of us who are ordained in the craft actually are legally licensed ministers, like myself. So we have come a long way. Wicca is a form of paganism, but not Wicca is paganism, but not all pagans are Wiccans. I want to clarify that. I consider myself an eclectic pagan, and quite honestly, I think we all kind of start off on the path of Wicca and or shamanism, in my experience. So I thought this is a good place to start if you're walking on this particular path. So is it religion? Yes, it is a religion. It basically started forming together back in the 50s with Gerald Gardner in England. It was brought to the United States by Ray Buckland, and went ahead and kind of grew even further with Scott Cunningham and Starhawk and many others, luminaries in this particular path throughout the 70s, especially during the 70s, and that whole uprising of human consciousness and whatnot was like a perfect petri dish for Wicca to evolve into something tangible and real and become its own tradition. Within Wicca, there are many traditions. Just like a regular church, there are denominations. Within Wicca, we have Gardnerianism, which stems from Gerald Gardner's path. We have Alexandrianism, which stems from Alexander Sanders' path. Well, they're all very eccentric, including myself, but Alexander was extremely eccentric. Well, he wanted to initiate hundreds and hundreds, and I believe he did initiate literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of witches in like these mass initiations. We have Frost Wicca with Gavin and Yvonne Frost, very controversial in the 70s and 80s. That controversy seems to be going away now. What other types of Wicca are there? There's Seal Wicca, there's Celtic Wicca. So there are many different traditions. There's traditional Wicca, those that believe in the lineage, the bloodline lineage, and hereditary Wicca. There's Nordic Wicca, those who lean toward the heathen tradition of the Norse. So again, just like any other religion, there are going to be denominations. So don't think that Wicca is one path, and as far as the organization of Wicca is concerned, there is none. And that's a good thing. I like the fact that within Wicca, usually many people are either solitary and eclectic, as well. Usually it is made up of covens, which are individual and run by the high priestess and high priest. Sometimes there are coven steads, sometimes there's loose organizations. Like Earth Spirit here in Roanoke, we are loosely affiliated, but there's no pope, there's no high queen of witches. Yes, people are given lots of titles. Traditionally, I was considered a king of witches back in South Florida because I had started 5 covens. So there are just like titles of recognition, but there is no central ruling power within witchcraft. I guess it's fair to say it's all done through integrity and respect, and those who have shown to be honorable and worthy of respect are honored and respected, like Starhawk, like Buckland, people like that. So there is no one that dubs you Pope or anything like that. Is witchcraft Wicca, and is Wicca witchcraft? Witchcraft is the practice of the craft. Let's clarify that there is a bit of a difference. Witchcraft is a religious path. It is a spiritual path. Witchcraft is the craft of the wise. So witchcraft is utilizing magic to create change to conform with will. Witchcraft can be anything from sympathetic magic to high magic, anything that deals with these old traditional healing methods, magical methods, etc. So not all witches are Wiccan. Let's clarify that also. And going back to what is paganism. Paganism is the umbrella term. Paganism is, quite honestly, to define paganism is quite simple. According to modern theologians and scholars, paganism and or heathenism, which is basically the same definition, is anything that is not Abrahamic. In other words, if it's not Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, by modern standards, it is considered pagan. So is Native American spirituality pagan? Yes, it is, by this definition. Is Buddhism pagan? By definition, yes. Is Hinduism pagan? By definition, yes. Is Celtic witchcraft pagan? By definition, yes. Is shamanism pagan? By definition, yes. So anything that does not fall under the big three Abrahamic religions is defined as paganism by modern Western standards. Yeah, there's a lot of in between there, and we could debate that for hours, but this is just to simplify a little bit. Again, we're trying to do just an overview here and hopefully give you a good foundation that you can start with. So what are Druids? Again, another long, lengthy story, but Druids were a particular priesthood and priestesshood back in the day, usually dealing with Northern Europe as well as Western Europe. There was and again, I'm just sharing from my studies. People might disagree with me. There was a break. Apparently they were lost. The wisdom was lost and all that kind of stuff. A new Druidic order was created back in the 20th century or maybe the late 19th century. And since then, they've kind of been thought of as the Druids. I forgot what the name is, but I have many friends in England who are part of the Druid order. And big shout out to you guys. Again, it's very similar to paganism. It is paganism, and it's very similar to Wicca, and there's a lot of influence. They all kind of overlap. What is occultism? Occultism, the definition of occult is hidden knowledge. So many times we are, especially when we're growing up, we're always being told that the occult is evil, the occult is evil, the occult is evil. It's not evil. We've been using and interchanging the word paranormal with occult lately. Occult just means hidden knowledge. That's all it means. Mystery schools. Knowledge that is not available generally to the public. So occult could mean a number of things. Anything from magic to witchcraft to what goes on in the White House and the Situation Room. It's hidden knowledge. Yeah, I know they are involved in the occult too, but that's a whole nother show. Is Wicca a cult? Good question. What is a cult? A cult, by modern standards, a cult is, for me, by modern standards, the word cult are mindless, brainwashed followers. That could apply to many things, including particular sects of Christianity. So, by definition, is witchcraft a cult? I would say no, depending on how far back you want to go in the definition of the word cult. If you go back a little bit further, the idea of a cult is a group of people who believe the same thing or have the same faith. Back when Christianity first started, it was considered a cult. And quite honestly, a few of the modern wings of it are quite culty, if you ask me. But, another show. Wicca is not a cult. Is Wicca satanic? This is where we get very interesting, because so much disinformation and propaganda has been out for decades. Hundreds and hundreds of years of negative propaganda dealing with the idea that witchcraft is satanic. So, let's start with the first question. Do witches believe in the devil? No. Witches don't believe in Satan. Satan is a Christian man-made construct. So if it's not a part of the Wiccan or witchcraft pantheon, how can we worship it? So there is no such thing as Satan. There is no such thing as Satanism in witchcraft and or Wicca and or paganism. Are there demons and bad malevolent spirits? Yeah, and entities, of course. But as far as worshiping Satan, not at all. How did the propaganda begin? The propaganda of witchcraft being satanic started in the, the Middle Ages, when the conquistadors and basically the Vatican was trying to kill all the pagans and convert all the pagans and whatnot, starting with tearing down the sacred groves, tearing down sacred sites and building churches on top of them. The only problem is that people still kept worshiping, the pagans still kept worshiping their gods. They'd go to church, and we see it still in modern day in Vodou and Santeria, where it's the old African pagan religion layered on top of, you know, Christianity through the saints and whatnot. What was going on back then, too? They were still worshiping Bridget. We hear Saint Bridget. Well, that was Bride, the goddess. And as far as the devil is concerned, and we're going to get into the deities in a little bit, but one of the deities was Cernunnos, or Hern, or Pan, and he had horns and cloves. So the devil decided, aha, the devil has horns and cloven feet. And that is where it all came about. The idea of witches worshiping Satan was literally superimposed onto the belief structure of pagans of the Middle Ages, and that is where we get the idea of witches worshiping a horned devil or Satan. Again, propaganda, not true at all. So, let's move into, I'm looking at my notes here. Let's move into what do pagans or Wiccans worship. Nature, natural forces, the cycles of nature. You'll notice that many Wiccan and or pagan groups, we celebrate the full moon. We celebrate the cycles of the moon. We celebrate the new moon. We celebrate eclipses. We celebrate the turning of the seasons, which is another thing that Samhain is, or Halloween, is the turning of the season. It is actually the midway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. So it's considered a high holy day for pagans and heathens and those who follow the nature cycles. So we worship nature. We worship natural forces. We worship the wind, the elements, earth, air, fire, water. We can get into that. Hopefully we'll have time to go more into that. But to simplify it, we worship divinity in all people. And again, to simplify, we celebrate contrast, good, bad, up, down, male, and female. In the female, we see the divine feminine in all women, but we also see it as an etheric construct, for lack of a better term, within the goddess. And the goddess herself has many faces, again, aligning with the natural forces of nature. We have Isis, who is the goddess of magic, of fertility, of birth. We have the goddess Hecate, who is the goddess of the crossroads, of death, of wisdom. So you'll notice that even within the divine feminine, each particular goddess is going to have different aspects dealing with the natural forces of life and dealing with the natural forces of nature and the cycles of birth, life, death, and rebirth and gestation. So we're going to see that not only in the goddess, we'll see it in the god. We'll see it in the young buck, you know, in the woods, the young deer worshiping Cernunnos. We see the horned god is very, very popular because he is seen as the god of nature. Whenever we see a regal deer with huge, you know, antlers and whatnot, we see that as a figure of God. So, as far as what deities a witch or a Wiccan worships, it really depends on your coven. If your coven has patron gods that they particularly work with. In my experience, my coven back in Florida, we worshipped Osiris and Isis. Those were our gods of the coven. But individually, we all worked with particular ones. And some people have a patron god or a patron goddess. Very similar to the saints. Again, the saints kind of were superimposed onto the gods and vice versa. And with that said, let me go into a broader term here about the gods in general. I think it's fair to say that most Wiccans and most pagans, and those of us who are a little bit more evolved than the beginner stage or whatnot, a high priest or high priestess like myself, we do understand that the deities are literally forces of nature. We do not see them as these, you know, I forgot the word I'm looking for, heteromorphic figures that are out there. We don't see it like the Christian God. We don't see a man in the sky with a beard looking down at everybody and shooting, you know, lightning bolts at you for thinking about sex. We don't see the gods like that. We don't see it as, you know, someone who's going to come back and save us and save humanity. They're not anthropomorphic. That's the word I'm looking for. The deities are not anthropomorphic. The images that we see are representations. They're archetypes of each particular natural force. Again, the image of Isis is an image of fertility. The image of the horned god Cernunnos is an image of male fertility and nature. And these are natural forces that are being symbolized. We don't see Cernunnos hanging around us. You know, yeah, his energy is real, and yes, probably thought forms have been created and they have morphed into their own entities in specific regions, or even elementals. But again, they're not like this god looking down at us and shooting lightning bolts. They're anthropomorphic. They're not anthropomorphic. They are simply symbols of natural forces. As well, we can go into the aspect of acknowledging, I don't want to say worshiping, because we worship all of nature, including ourselves and including all the natural forces, but let's throw the elements and elementals in there as well. The element of earth, the elementals of earth. Yes, many of us believe in the Fae folk. We believe in the in-between world, that within the in-between world, there are, let's say, fairies that help the crops grow. There are gnomes and trolls living, you know, in the earth to help the minerals to nourish us, to nourish the soil so that we can grow our crops with healthy soil. So, yes, we acknowledge earth, air, fire, water, and of course spirit, and the elementals within that particular realm and that particular kingdom. Just like any shaman, just like any kahuna, just like anyone who worships nature and is a part of earth religion, that's a part of our worship. And I don't know if worship is a good word for it, quite honestly. I believe we acknowledge it. I believe we align with it. I believe we call upon it and evoke it into us. But I can't really say we worship. You don't see us kneeling and bowing. You know, I shared a meme the other day about how we don't kneel or bow. We embrace. You'll notice most of us pray like this, with our arms outward, just to embrace the energy, to evoke and invoke the energy of that particular god, goddess, element, or elemental. So I can't say it's worship, but I believe we revere and we honor these particular forces. We talked a little bit about nature spirits. Yes, of course, we believe in sprites and whatnot. And if we don't believe in it, we acknowledge them as a, again, an archetype of a natural force. So, one of the things that I feel is important is that the idea of duality, and again, this goes into the whole worship and revere. We acknowledge contrast. I don't want to say we worship it. I talked about it earlier. We acknowledge masculine energy, feminine energy. We acknowledge positive energy. We acknowledge negative energy. Everything has to have both. Everything has to have both. That's why, actually, quite honestly, that's why I got involved with paganism, is that there wasn't this whole machismo, divine feminine stuff going on. It was, we all have masculine and feminine energy within us. And so does nature. It has contrast no matter what. There's always an assertive force and a passive force working in science and nature. Not everything is good or bad. Simple answer, nature and natural forces. We revere. We believe we are a part of nature, so therefore we revere each other. In many of the rituals, well, the ones that I do, we anoint each other and say, "Thou art God, thou art goddess." We acknowledge the divinity within all things, everything from the human being, to the plant, to the air, to the earth, and to the cycles of nature. So moving on, how does one become a witch or a Wiccan? Um, it's a lot easier than you think. Quite honestly, when I started, I got involved by reading Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner by Scott Cunningham. Excellent book. I promote it on most of these shows that I do. Scott had a very no-nonsense, very clear way, very uncomplicated way of explaining it. You can do a dedication ceremony all by yourself. You can dedicate yourself to the path of nature, to the path of the old gods, etc. If you're lucky enough to have a group in your area, you can start going to events that are being public events. I do it here myself through Earth Spirit. Earth Spirit is kind of our outer court. I do public rituals, I do public events, and as we get to know the person, we may or may not invite them to be a part of the Central Coven. The name of my coven is Star Mountain Grove. We've only got about 5 members. It's family, because that's what happens within a coven. They become your family, and you have to be able to trust them. You don't want to be in a coven with people you don't know that don't know how to evoke something, and the next thing you know, they're calling upon water elements and your pipes burst, you know. So, or they're calling on things that aren't very good because they don't know better. You want to feel comfortable and feel safe. So yeah, it is a little bit of work getting into a coven. A lot of people get frustrated with that, but you have to remember the rewards of being in a coven is you're joining a family, and you're with people that you completely trust, not only with your physical life, but your spiritual life, because we do believe that we are all linked together throughout time and space. Once we get initiated into that coven, we become a sisterhood, brotherhood, not only on this plane, but in all the planes. It's an infinite connection, and it may follow you from lifetime to lifetime. Yes, most pagans believe in reincarnation. I don't think I've ever met a pagan who doesn't believe in reincarnation. Is it a little bit different than Buddhism? I'd say so, maybe a little bit. I believe, for me, reincarnation is just the opportunity for the soul to continue to evolve. Not only that, I believe, as most pagans believe, our soul does not die. And I just had a little visitor join me. This is Luna. Yes, I named my cats after goddesses. And she just jumped on my notes, so I can't see. But yeah, most of us do believe in reincarnation, and yeah, we believe there's a time of rest between the lives, and perhaps you'll get to see your family and whatnot during that in the called the summer lands. And but it's time we continue moving on. You know, your spirit does not die; it is infinite, it is eternal, and it will continue moving to another plane of consciousness, whether it be on this planet, another dimension. But your consciousness will continue and will continue to evolve. So those are some of the beliefs, and going back to what I said, how does one become Wiccan? Some people ask, do you have to be a male? Do you have to be a female? Again, it's up to that particular... If you're going to join a coven, they might only be all women. I believe, what is it, Dianic is another tradition. They're all women. They don't have men in their covens. There are covens that are strictly trans women, that you have to be a trans woman. There are covens that are strictly male-oriented. There are covens that are, strictly one particular gender or another. But anyone can be. It doesn't matter if you're male, if you're female, if you're trans, if you're black or white. There's no race involved. There's no gender expression involved. There is no belief involved. It's just knowing that this is the path for you. So there are really no requirements of being Wiccan. Again, it would deal with the tradition of the particular group that you're joining, unless you're going to become a solitaire. Somebody asked, are pagans pacifists? I love that. I would like to think most of us are. I know I'm a pacifist. Most of us are... Many of us are involved in activism and anti-war activism, so I would think that's kind of a basic thing. But again, there's no Bible. Let me make that clear. There is no Bible. There'll be people that put out and publish witches' Bibles, but it's just their version. There is no one central governing force or belief. It can be very eclectic, even within the Wiccan traditions. Do you have to be homosexual or bisexual? No, you don't. There are many, probably a majority, just like any percentage of the general population, probably what, 10-20% are homosexual or bisexual, and the rest are usually heterosexual. Are they more accepting? 90% of them are more tolerant and more accepting. I don't want to use the word tolerance. Do they worship naked? That's a big one. A lot of people, I've been in groups where they start taking off their clothes. I'm like, no, we're not one of those groups. Don't take off your clothes unless you're comfortable, or it is a nude performing coven. Very interesting. How did it start? You know, a lot of people think that, oh, witches practice naked, they run through the woods naked. We have to remember where this all came from. This started with Gerald Gardner, the modern version of Wicca. And the man was a flagrant nudist. Basically, his house was a nudist colony in England. And he was a nudist, so he performed his rituals naked. And he probably made it mandatory for people within his coven to practice naked. I know Aleister Crowley and some of his traditions they practice naked. Again, it's tradition, but it's not mandatory. I have never been in a nude coven. Have I done nude ritual? Yeah, of course, but with one partner maybe. So no, skyclad is not mandatory, and I'd say it's fair to say most of us are not necessarily skyclad practitioners. And by the way, skyclad means nude, being dressed only with the sky. And that's where that term comes from. So no, you do not have to practice nude. And if someone says you have to, run. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And if they say you have to, you don't need to be a part of that group. Go somewhere else. You don't have to do that. Do we perform ritual sex? Well, there is an aspect of the regular, normal ritual that most of us do, and there's a part of that ritual called the Great Rite, and it is a union of divine masculine with divine feminine energy. Some groups perform it physically, where the woman will lay on the altar and the man, the group's supposed to turn around and the man and the woman have sex. And it's supposed to be, again, symbolic of the masculine and the feminine joining together. However, not every group does that. In my group, we just use a dagger and a chalice, and we plunge the dagger into the chalice, and that represents the Great Rite, the union of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Again, it depends on the group. And if you don't feel comfortable being in a group that has ritual sex, don't do it. Don't be a part of that group. But are we more open to stuff like that? Of course we are. We're a lot more liberal with our sexuality. For goodness sake, most of paganism is fertility cults and fertility rituals. We're not so hung up on Western standards when it comes to sex. Sex is not dirty. Sex is natural. Sex is beautiful. But as far as having sex and ritual, you don't have to do it, and you don't have to belong to a group that does it. Is there sex magic? Yeah, there is sex magic. Sex magic is literally the raising of energy through sexuality and copulation and orgasm. I'm sure you've heard me do these online spells and whatnot. Well, we'll raise the energy, then we release the energy. Sex is one way of raising energy. You can use chanting, you could use a spell, words, rhyming, whatnot, repeating the same word over and over and over to raise the energy and then release it. Again, sex is just one form of raising energy. You don't have to do it, you don't have to be a part of it, and you don't have to be a part of a group that makes you do it. Just go somewhere else. Find another teacher, find another coven if you're uncomfortable with that. Do Wiccans drink blood? No. No, Wiccans do not drink blood. No, Wiccans do not sacrifice animals. Even within the goddess charge, it says we do not sacrifice animals. Do Wiccans use mind-altering substances? Again, it's tradition depending on what group you're with. Some groups are alcohol-free, drug-free, psychedelic-free. Sometimes there might be a special event where mind-altering substances are used to alter your state of consciousness. For example, like an ayahuasca experience. But that would not be within a coven ritual setting. That would be a special, separate event. And again, you do not have to participate in that. And if you're uncomfortable being around it, don't be a part of that group. Find another group. Do you have to come from a certain bloodline or family? It depends on the group. Again, notice how there's a lot of differences. It's very individual. It's not organized. I like the fact that it's not an organized religion or an organized spiritual path. It is very autonomous. But some particular groups are traditionalists and or ancestral, and they'll only want people who have ancestry. I believe in past life connections, so perhaps you were a witch in a past life. Scott Cunningham used to say, the goddess calls those to her altar who have already once been. So many times when we're attracted to this particular path, it's that we've done it in a past life. So I don't believe in the fact that we need to be hereditary, or that you need to be Celtic, or that you need to be Nordic, or whatnot. But hey, some heathen groups are going to want people that are Norse. Celtic groups are going to want people that are Celtic. But it's not necessary to become a Wiccan or a pagan. Do you have to renounce Christianity and your baptism? Absolutely not. In the coven, you're probably, or within your practice, I should say, within a group scenario, you may not be worshiping Jesus and Mary, but on an individual level, I mean, when I first started, I had a picture of Jesus and a picture of Mary, and those were my god and goddess when I first started. As a matter of fact, Christo-Paganism has become very popular lately. But it becomes, I will say this, though, that Abrahamic religions being so patriarchal, it becomes almost counterintuitive to draw on the patriarchal energies and the patriarchal representations, religious representations, into such a matrifocal type of path. But for some people, Christ and Mary work better. So if that's what you need, there's no reason why you can't do it, at least on a solitary level. Do we connect? Do we have possessed psychic and special powers? Okay, I believe we all have psychic abilities. I believe they've been suppressed. I believe the media, our government, I believe the educational system, peer pressure and all that has done everything it can to oppress our consciousness. As a matter of fact, I have a meme going around that says the greatest conspiracy in the world has been that to oppress our human consciousness. I believe we are all psychic. I believe we all have intuitive abilities, some more than others, some comes easier than others, but we all have the ability, and you can train yourself to regain that. Do we focus on that? No, it's a gift. We call it your tools or your gifts. I read tarot. I can channel, but that's a gift. It's not. My practice isn't based on that. But you will pick up specific gifts. You will learn the art of tarot. You'll learn the art of scrying, the art of using a pendulum, the art of dowsing, the art of the I Ching or the runes or any type of divination. Some people have an ability to interpret dreams. Some people have the ability to astral project. Not everyone's going to have the same gift, but it all stems from that intuitive psychic ability that we all have. It's not supernatural. It's just been oppressed. It's completely natural to have these abilities. It's just a matter of bringing them back up to the surface. And actually, that's what my course, How to Connect with Your Spirit Guides, is all about. Little plug. How much time do we have? 15 more minutes. So, do we summon spirits? All right. Good and very interesting view on that, because the reality of it is that many people think we are constantly calling spirits and evoking spirits and creating portals and all that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, I have a friend of mine that was like, oh, your house scares me. Are there any spirits in here? I'm like, no, I keep it as clean as possible. I don't invoke anything into my house. I don't want anything into my house unless I've welcomed it for a particular reason. But where does this idea come from that we invoke spirits and whatnot? Quite honestly, that comes from the Middle Ages. That comes from the old Abrahamic, Kabbalistic form of magic, high magic, as most people call it, or modern magic, as some people call it now. That's Abrahamic, Kabbalistic magic. You know, the The Key of Solomon talks about this, and a lot of the old grimoires that border on what you might consider a Satanism, but it's really just black magic or gray magic. But yeah, they used to evoke, or they probably still do, a lot of the modern magicians. They evoke spirits and demons and gods and goddesses and capture them, which I think is absolutely wrong. They capture them in that triangle. I'm sure you've seen the Black Mirror of the triangle. They capture them in the circle to do their bidding. If you ever read the Key of Solomon or any of these old grimoires, it's almost like a recipe book of what god or goddess, and they call them demons, but I will clarify that in a second, what demon to invoke in order to do your bidding for specifically love or money or a job or whatnot. First of all, I think it's very rude to demand an entity to do your bidding, so I would never do that. But if you read the Key of Solomon or any of these old grimoires, you'll notice the names of the gods and goddesses, the names of the demons, are the names of ancient gods and goddesses, like Astaroth was a goddess, well, now she's a demon. So in the new Abrahamic religion, the old gods and goddesses were created into demons, and then they used them, but yet they still use them in Kabbalistic magic to do their bidding. Again, it's that patriarchal energy of forcing something. I personally would never do that. And quite honestly, unless you want to get a pissed off demon or god or goddess, I would not suggest doing it. It's awful karma. It's like slavery of an entity. So no, we do not force or invoke spirits. We welcome the elements. Actually, even within my own group, I don't want to use the word politically correct, but I guess that's what you call it, is that we don't invoke gods or goddesses. We don't invoke the elementals. We evoke it. We evoke the goddess within. We evoke the god within. We evoke the element of fire within. We all have it within us. We evoke the element of water. It's already within us. It's just a matter of bringing it out. And I've learned, unfortunately, through my mistakes, of what can happen when you invoke stuff and you don't know how to get rid of it. Yes, I have had pipes burst. Yes, I've had my altar catch on fire because I've invoked salamanders or dragons or something like that. So don't invoke something unless you know exactly what you're doing, and do it as a friend, not as demanding them to do your bidding, if you're going to do that. But again, I tend to shy away from that, and I usually tell people not to do that. Do you need to belong to a coven to be initiated? Not necessarily. You can do a self-dedication ceremony. You can do a self-initiation ceremony if you would like. Is it awesomely cool to get initiated into a coven? Absolutely. I do initiations for my coven. We have a degree system. Yes, within a coven there is kind of like a learning system, like first degree, everyone has to know specific terminology and knowledge and demonstrate a specific wisdom and or demonstrate the ability to perform certain magical and or witchcraft skills. Second degree would take it a step further. Third degree, by the third degree, my students have to be able to teach other people. They have to learn to teach other people. Within my group, our degree system is to create more teachers, not to create followers. I believe in creating other teachers. I want to know that my students have the ability to explain at least as well as me, if not better. And trust me, I've had high priestesses that have far gone beyond me, and they've been done even better and have done great work in this world and sharing this knowledge. But it depends on the group. What you'll get in a coven is you will get a structured path. And what I mean by that, for example, my coven, we meet willy-nilly. I mean, we meet willy-nilly as far as my classes are concerned. They're scheduled when I have time to schedule them. You will have other groups that are very structured. They might want you to meet every week. They might want you to meet every month. And you may have to do this, this, and this. I don't believe in hierarchy, so I have a difficulty with that. But in some covens, there are hierarchies. I remember I did a public ceremony once, and somebody was like yelling at the, not yelling, but scolding the crowd, like, "You're not supposed to eat before the high priest." And I was like, "Go ahead, I'll eat last." I'm like, I'm the host. I saw myself as the host. I'm like, "You go ahead and eat." I don't believe in hierarchy. I do not like hierarchy, but in some cases there is that tradition. So it is good to know a little bit about pagan etiquette. So if you go visit a group and they invite you into their coven for a public event, never touch the stuff on the altar. That would be very rude. Never cut in front of the high priest or the priestess, or get in front of them in line for the food or anything like that. Just out of etiquette. Never grab people's necklaces, pentacles, jewelry. Never walk up to somebody and grab their necklace. That's very, very rude. Nobody likes that. And that's really just about it. And we're starting to run out of time. Some of the terminology you're going to hear, and actually it's funny, I had someone say to me, "Oh, I think that person's a witch." I'm like, go up to them and say, "Merry meet." They're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "That's how we say hello. Go up and say, 'Merry meet.'" And they'll say, you know, "Merry meet, merry meet." The other day, when I was on vacation in Clearwater, of all things, I'm sitting at Frenchie's. Oh, one of the Frenchies. I'm not going to say which one. I don't want to out them. I was sitting at one of the Frenchies, and the waitress wrote on my check, "Blessed be." And I turned around, and I noticed that she was wearing a pentagram. I was like, right on. So blessed be is another term. We don't really say amen. We usually say "so be it," or "so mote it be," or "blessed be." You'll hear that a lot. No, it's not like Charmed. The first, and actually I'm going to end on this because we're running out of time. Witchcraft is not like Charmed. You're not going to fly on a broom. You are not going to shoot fire and lightning out of your fingertips. You're not going to fight demons like Prue and Piper and the Halliwell sisters from Charmed. It's not like that. A Hollywood witch and a real witch are two completely different things. And I'm going to leave you with that because we are running out of time. That's the first assignment I ever give to a brand new student. And actually, it's kind of their pre-assignment because I won't even take on a student until they turn in an essay, and I like the outcome of the essay. And that essay is, what is the difference between a real witch or Wiccan and a Hollywood witch? What's the difference? Can you tell the difference? And real quick, I got another minute. The reason why I created that is I used to get students that would get mad that they couldn't shoot lightning out of their fingers, or they couldn't levitate, or they couldn't, you know, they couldn't walk through walls or whatnot. Yeah, it's probably possible, and there are probably some avatars in India that can do this kind of stuff. But the reality of it is that you are not going to like shoot smoke out of your eyes or fly or anything like that. So, and to a teacher to have a student who's like, "When am I going to learn how to fly?" It's like, get out of here. And yes, I did get rid of that student. It was like, you don't belong here. But so figure it out. Go see for yourself. Look up the difference. Research. Get realistic. Remember, Wicca and witchcraft is not a lifestyle. Wearing black and pentagrams and looking like the kids from The Craft is not walking the path. Walking the path is walking in the path of harmony with nature, with yourself, and with your fellow human beings. That is what the path is about. The path of magic will only grow the more your connection with your higher self, with nature, and with spirit grows. If you want magical power, connect with nature. Connect with your higher self. Connect with source consciousness. That is how your power grows. It's not out of want. It's out of aligning and attuning with reverence. I love you. Have a wonderful week. We've got more coming next week. It's the season of the witch here on the Just Bernard Show. I'll see you next time.